Once upon a time, there lived a man called Afunezi. He was married to the love of his heart, Onwa. Onwa was a very beautiful young girl, and they lived happily to the envy of other married couples in the village. After many years of marriage, they could not have any child, and Afunezi was the heir apparent to his father's properties, and so was expected to produce an heir that would also inherit the properties to continue the family lineage. One day, Onwa, the love of his life, called him and told him it was time he took another wife, but he refused. No, my love, he said, I don't want any woman to come in between us. He replied, staring at her deep in the eyes. But you know, my love, what society demands of you as the heir to your father's properties. Please go and take another wife. I pray no one will come in between us, she advised. That was how Funezi's friend Opia introduced him to a girl from a neighboring village called Egu. The mystery of it all was that as soon as Afunezi married Egu and brought her to live in the house, Onwa became pregnant, and Ego also got pregnant. Onwa delivered a baby girl, and Afunezi was so happy that he named her Obim, meaning my heart. He did not care whether it was a boy or girl. All he was happy about was that he could feel and touch the blood and flesh produced by Onwa and himself. 2 months later, Ego gave birth also to a baby girl, and he named her Amaka, meaning she's too lovely. Ego went on to deliver 4 sons to the joy of Afunezi, but none of them could take the place of Obim in his heart. Although he did not neglect the other children, they could all feel where his heart belonged. Obim was always called Papa's favorite. This did not go down well with Ego and her children. Ego felt she bore him the heir to his family and deserved better attention. Afunezi always gave Ego more of everything he brought to the house because she had more mouths to feed. But to his dismay, he could not satisfy her once and would not let others be. She was full of envy and jealousy of everything happening between Afunezi and Onwa, of which the two lovebirds did not even notice. Onwa was never jealous. She was quite aware of the fact that Ego had more children and would even give her from what her husband had given her just to make her happy. She was contented with what her beloved husband gave her and would manage as much as she could in order not to stress him. Ego would not let her husband be. She was always demanding, and it got to a point that Afunezi became worried, and on noticing that, had to call Ego to advise her. This angered Ego so much that she sought for a means to harm her husband because she felt he had gone to speak ill of her to his first wife. It was not long Afunezi fell sick. This worried Onwa and her daughter Obim, and they started taking him from one doctor to the other to cure him of the illness. Throughout the period of their absence from home, Ego and her children did not surface the place their father was being treated. It was only Onwa and Obim that were trying their best to take him to the best doctors in the area to make him get well. While they were busy looking for solution to Afunezi's illness, Ego and her children were busy selling the land that belonged to their father and enjoying themselves with the money realized. They would sit down at home planning how they would share their father's property if he dies. When some of the villagers went to visit Onwa and her husband, where he was being treated, they would be narrating all that Ego and her children were doing at home. After a short time, Afunisi became worried about his health because he was not getting any better. He wondered how his wife and daughter would be able to manage if anything happened to him. He decided to bless Obim because he knew she would not have an upper hand where her half brothers were concerned. He called her the next morning before putting anything in his mouth. My daughter Obim, nature and your humility will fight for you and bless you, my dear, he said, and then turned to his wife to continue. And my love, Obim, will take care of you when she grows up. But make sure you live to bring her up properly because of her love. He managed to talk and talk, thanking both for taking good care of him. And his surprised wife wondered why he was saying all that. It wasn't long before he gave up the ghost. She finally got your father, Obim, Onwa said, crying. Where did I go wrong? She would sob as she held on to her husband's dead body. That same day, he was brought back home and buried. Onwa could not bear it and would have died if not for the sake of their daughter Obim, as she remembered the words her husband had said before he died. Onwa needed to be strong to stay alive, to take care of their flesh and blood. She would cry and cry, remembering her beloved husband. She managed to recover and kept on living for the sake of her husband's wish. Few days later, to the surprise of everyone in the village, Ego and her children shared their father's properties among themselves without giving a single pin to their stepmother Onwa and their half-sister Obim. The only thing that was not taken away from them was the house they lived in the compound, and the piece of land they farmed on. Onwa would go to the farm very early each day with her daughter and return home late every evening to cook, eat, and sleep, except on Eke days, which was a day people were not allowed to go to the farm. It was a market day and a sacred one for performing ceremonies and sacrifices to the gods of the land, so no one was allowed in the village to go to the farm. Many times when Onwa and Obi went to the farm, Amaka would be at the other side of the farm that belonged to them, cooking, eating, and laughing with her friends, showing off to make Obim jealous. But Obim had no time for that. One Eke market day, when Onwa had gone to the market, Ego called Obim, which was unusual because she never spoke with them. They lived in the same compound but in separate buildings. Yes, ma, Obim replied her. Good morning, ma. You called me. Good morning, my beloved daughter, her stepmother said, with a deceptive smile on her face. Yes, I called you. I want you to go on an errand for me. Yes, mother, I'm listening, she replied respectfully, as was her habit of doing. She had been trained properly to respect people by her mother. I need your help, Obim, her stepmother reciprocated in a loving tone that Obim had never heard her use. Obim was surprised to hear her say that. Why would she be in need of her today of all this? She thought. And what about her children? Why couldn't she send them? She wondered. Her stepmother rarely spoke with her and her mom. So why would she be in need of her all of a sudden? She asked within her. I want you to go to the farm to bring me the bangle I forgot there yesterday because I'll be going to a marriage ceremony today and I need to wear it, she said, smiling as though her whole world depended on that very bangle. Immediately the words came out of her stepmother's mouth. Obim knew the woman meant her no good. But mother, you know today is a K day and no one is expected to go to the farm, she replied, expecting her to change her mind. But alas, she did not. Are you trying to disobey me? She asked in a hot tone, glaring at her. No, mother, I'm not, she replied. Obim had always respected elders and would do everything in her powers to please them. She looked at her stepmother and knew the woman meant her harm and began to cry. What are you still waiting for? Ego asked. Start going now so that you'll get back within the blink of an eye, she commanded. Obim turned as if heading towards the house. But her stepmother's voice stopped her. Wait, don't worry. If it's the door to your house, I'll shut it. Just start going. Obim legs felt very heavy on the ground as though she could not move. Keep going, Ego repeated. I'm waiting for you here and don't be long. Slowly, Obim started moving towards the farmland. As she was going, she was crying her heart out with a lot of regret and the thought of how her mother would survive if something dangerous happened to her. When she had gone, her stepmother started dancing in a joyous mood. She felt she had gotten Onwa at last and was very happy. At least, if Obim did not return home, they would wait a little and then throw Onwa out of the house. She would then be the owner. She would then, with her children, become the original owners of all the houses and lands belonging to her husband. Ha 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 ha. She was laughing happily. At the other side, tears were streaming down Obim's face as she moved towards the farm and she started to pray. Please, Father, wherever you are, guide me, your daughter, back home safely. Don't let me die. Mother needs me. Please, Father, don't let me die. It wasn't long before she arrived at the farm. She entered the hut and searched everywhere, but there was no bangle. It dawned on her that her stepmother had just deliberately tricked her down to the farm on a forbidden day for something terrible to happen to her. She must be really wicked, she summed up. Immediately that realization came, she started to sweat and shiver, perspiration running down her face. Since she could not find the bangle, she decided to start going back home fast. She was happy nothing had happened to her, nothing bad. She stepped out of the hut and started running back home. She was running, but as she rounded the first bend, whoa, she saw two old women blocking her path and came to a sudden halt. What do you think you are doing here? On a K day, they asked furiously. Do you think this is all a joke? Great mothers, she said in a meek and humble voice, kneeling down before them. I'm so sorry, but my stepmother sent me to the farm to bring her forgotten bangle. Why did you agree to do that? They asked. I told her today is okay and no one is supposed to go to the farm. But she insisted. She replied, crying and begging them to spare her life. All right, you have to come with us, though, they both said, marching her towards their home in the dead heart of the forest. Once in their home, Obi was locked inside the building, and the building was fenced around. She was not permitted to go out of the fenced compound. But she did something that won the hearts of the women. Every morning, she would be the first to wake up, sweep the rooms in the house, and keep the entire compound clean. She would wash the dirty plates and clothes in the house, and as soon as she realized the women had woken up, she would go before them and kneel down to greet them respectfully. At the village, Obin's mother had returned home from the market and found the house empty. She asked all those around if they had seen Obim, but they all said they had not seen her. Ego and her children also said they had not seen her since morning. The villagers became worried and a thorough search of the entire village was conducted, but she was not found. After 3 days, Obim went missing. Onwa concluded something terrible must have happened to her. I have failed definitely my husband, she sobbed aloud. What's the point of my continuing to live? At the other house, Ego and her children were completely happy. Ego felt elated. Her plans had worked perfectly well, and her children knew she was the brain behind it all. They felt their mother was a genius. Meanwhile, the elderly women were highly pleased with Obi, and 3 weeks later called her and told her it was time for her to go back home. Obi was very happy. So I will see my mother once again? Oh, my. She was so happy to hear that. And as she was about to leave, they gave an old guard a calabash to go with her. They told her how to use it. She was to call her mother inside the house, lock up all the doors and windows, and then break the guard by hitting it on the floor. She thanked them for their kindness and escorted her to the entrance of her village before they went back. At the village, Ego and her children were in front of Obim's house, shouting at her and telling her she was to vacate the house because it now belonged to them. The villagers were trying to intervene, but they would not allow. Instead, Ego's sons were threatening to beat them up. Someone sighted Obim and shouted, Obim has come back! Obim has come back! Wow, Obim has come back! There was a great shock as her stepmother and children stood looking at her and a small guard in her hands. Obin's mother rushed forward to engulf her daughter with a great hug and tears streaming down her cheeks. They both went inside. The old villagers were very happy to see her and they shut the door. The villagers, happy, she retreated back to their homes. Obim told her mother all that had happened to her when she had gone to the market on that Eke day. At the end of the story, they shut all the doors and windows, and Obim did as she was told by the elderly women and smashed the guard on the floor. Immediately, the house changed into a big and lovely mansion with every comfortable amenity a house could have inside it. There was a lot of money everywhere, and Obim became a rich girl. The villagers and the greedy stepmother came to ask how she was able to acquire such riches. Obim told them how it came about. The next day, vowed her daughter was going to bring riches greater than the one Obim had brought home. She sat down and planned it out with her children, and on the next Eke day, they sent Amaka off to the farm to the consternation of the villagers who felt bad knowing they were breaking the laws of the land. Almost what happened to Obim happened to Amaka, but when the elderly women took Amaka home, she surprised them with her actions and they were not pleased at all. She would lie down on the bed and command the elderly women to bring her food, wash her clothes, and serve her as though she was a queen. On the third day of her arrival, she called the women and told them she was leaving the miserable house in the forest and commanded them to prepare the guard she was to take back home. They did as she commanded and brought the guard to her. But on sighting it, Amaka laughed. She told them the guard was too ugly to take back to the village and that they should give her a beautiful one. The women quickly did as she said and gave her a golden one. And satisfied, she commanded them to escort her back home. As they were escorting her, they gave her the same instruction they had given Obim on what to do with the guard. They were almost at the village when Amaka turned and told them to go back because they were not looking presentable enough for people to see them. The women, feeling hot, turned and went back while Amaka continued to the village. The villagers sighted Amaka and shouted, Amaka is back! As soon as her mother and siblings heard that, they all rushed out and saw that she was holding a golden guard instead of the old local guard Obim brought back with her. I told you all my daughter will bring back a better guard and riches home. Look at it now, she said. Just take a look at the golden guard she's holding. She held her daughter and all her children followed into the house. They locked all the doors and windows in the house, but before they broke the guard, Ego came out to warn the villagers, parading herself. They were not to come close to their house, no matter what, so that none of the wealth Amaka had brought would get into their hands. She retreated and inside, she retreated and shut the door. Amaka hit the guard on the floor, and instantly, different kinds of diseases, illness, animals came out and they started shouting, but it was too late. The doors had been locked and the windows had been locked. All the villagers, they had warned not to come near. So their shouts could be heard, but no one could save them because the villagers kept their distance as they had been warned. Ego and her family were all destroyed out of greed and envy. Obim and her mother inherited all the land and houses that belonged to Afunisi, her father. Till date, Obim's story had never ceased to entertain the ears of the later children born in the society. That became the legacy left by her daughter, making her father's name to be historical. What more can a man wish for? That's the end of the story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video so that you'll be the one to get the first set as soon as it comes out. Thank you very much.